Okay guys, I'm going to walk you through how to use our middle of year benchmarking spreadsheet. So the first couple of things are things the literacy specialist is going to need to do to prepare the benchmark. The first thing you're going to want to do is check that all the student information looks accurate. I've preloaded all your 6th and 7th grade data. So you should see all your 6th graders here, all your 7th graders here, and the literacy specialist will need to manually enter in the student ID number, first, middle, and last name of all the 8th graders who are in intervention. You only need to test those 8th graders in intervention. Please make sure, as we're going throughout this entire process, that you enter in information exactly the way it is formatted and being requested in this spreadsheet. Any kind of shortcuts that you try to take or changing the formatting of the spreadsheet will break the spreadsheet, and then we won't be able to upload it in navigation early on. And we know we had so much trouble uploading the beginning of your spreadsheets in navigation because people had taken shortcuts, copy and pasted things, or added in information or deleted information that was actually really important for navigation being able to read it. So as we go through everything, really make sure you're putting information in as carefully as possible and exactly in the way that the spreadsheet is requesting it. And that means putting in first, middle, and last, not like merging these and putting the whole name in with a comma in the middle. Again, that's something that would like break the spreadsheet. So going back to the 6th grade data, what else? So once you've checked all your rosters, they look good. You've added in your 8th grade names. The next thing you need to do is tell the spreadsheet whether students were fluent or not fluent to begin with. Because again, we're only going to be testing the not fluent students in our CBM. And you want to, before you even start benchmarking, you want that list for yourself and for your teachers to make sure you don't miss anyone. I think that the most accurate way to figure out who's an F and who's an NF is to go back to your beginning of year spreadsheet and sort it by tier. And then all your kids that are tier 2 or below, you're going to go through here and fill in not fluent for everyone who's not fluent and fluent for everyone who's fluent. Okay? And the reason you want to go back to your beginning of year data rather than, let's say, ESP or like the rosters of how kids are placed is we know some kids may have been mistiered, and you might actually accidentally have some not fluent kids in a tier 1 class, and so that wouldn't be a best practice for how to get this information. Okay, so the LS fills in who's fluent, who's not. All right. The next thing that the LS needs to do is for all those kids that were not fluent, and I've got some sample data down here. For all the kids, let's say, that you've labeled that are not fluent, you are going to want to tell your team, in case other people are going to be testing these kids, what grade level to start on. And that does need to be the grade level that's currently set in navigation. So like we talked about, when you open that student profile page in navigation, what grade level does it say for our CBM? And that's where they'll be. So let's say this kid's at a 5, this kid's at a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1, and it doesn't go any lower than 1, that will work, okay? And these are restricted, so you can only choose from grades 1 through 6. I don't think any kids currently are being progress monitored on a 6, so you wouldn't start with that, but if kids pass the 5th, as we'll see, then you might end up testing them up on a 6th, all right? But so once the LS has checked the rosters of all 3 grades, entered for every single kid who's fluent, who's not fluent, and then entered in for any of the kids who are not fluent, let's say their RCBM grade level. Then, once all that data is complete, this is something that you could send out to your teachers and they could start collecting RCBM data on it, okay? But before we do that, I want to go over the maze section. Now, I recommend that only the literacy specialist enters them in the maze data. I think it's going to be really helpful for just one person to really quickly do the data entry, type it all in, check it all, and make sure that it's perfect, okay? So you're entering your data, your corrects, errors. This looks just like the BOY spreadsheet. What is different is that we've locked the formulas for the corrects and the median errors. So you can't type in there, which is awesome. So it's harder to break, basically. So I've already typed in some maze data, and the conditional formatting is different on each of these tabs, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And the colors tell you what percentile students fall in, okay? So if you enter in the data, oh, and another thing that's really important is you'll notice for all the zeros, I've typed zeros. There can be no blanks in our data, okay? That was one of the biggest things that broke navigation. It's not going to throw off the Excel sheet. The Excel sheet, if this is a blank, it's not going to mess up Excel. But it is not going to upload into navigation. So please take the time now to make sure every single cell for each level of benchmarking has a number in it, okay? So if you see dark blue, that means that student tested in the above the 90th percentile. This is 75th to 90th, 50th to 75th, 25th to 50th. Anything above the 25th percentile we consider on level, and these students should all be tier 1. Okay, but going down, orange is 10th to 25th percentile, and red is 0 to 10th percentile. And those students would be tier 1.5 as long as they're fluent. Notice I've marked all these kids fluent, so their maze score is the only thing that matters. Okay. The light red shading tells you that that student made more than 5% errors, and that the reason we're shading that is because you want to double check those kids, especially if they're on the cusp between tier 1 and 1.5. So this student may have gotten 30 correct, but look, they made 10 errors. That means that 1 in 3 they were getting wrong, and that tells me the student was probably guessing on most of their maze tests. And so they should probably be a 1.5, okay? So we're expecting to see 4 tier 1s and then 2 tier 1.5s, just based on the data. Let's go check that. And we do see 4 tier 1s and 2 tier 1.5s under suggested tier placement. But notice, you know, that one student, I think it was Diani, was the one who, had the really high errors, and so that's why we have a final tier placement. Every single kid, you should check, look at the big picture of their data before you finalize where you think what tier they should be in, okay? Let's see what happens if we forgot to type in that a student was fluent, okay? In that case, you're going to see the word false. Anytime you see the word false in the suggested tier placement column, it means you're missing data somewhere in the spreadsheet. So make sure that as you're going through and testing, that you are checking the suggested tier placement, because that's going to be the best place to check to see if there's any holes in your data. Okay, so that I think is it for maze entry. And now let's talk about RCBM entry, okay? You'll notice something a little bit different. Instead of like 6th grade RCBM and then 5th grade RCBM, you see set A RCBM and set B RCBM. There's even a set C RCBM and a set D RCBM. I cannot imagine that you are testing a kid on more than 4 grade levels, so we ended it there, okay? The last section is final RCBM data, and this is all frozen. This is all formulas, and it's going to pull from earlier in the spreadsheet, and that's what's going to help Excel figure out what the suggested tier placement is. So you just don't have to worry about this here, okay? The reason we did it set A, B, C, D is because, again, kids might be starting on all different levels, and we labeled it A, B, C, D instead of using numbers because we thought it would be less confusing, okay? So now let's enter in some data, some sample RCBM data. I'm going to send you guys a table that summarizes the cutoffs, the up, testing down, or staying put cutoffs for each grade level. But the Excel spreadsheet is going to help you with that. So if this student I'm testing on a 5th grade level, let's say they got 105 words, okay? Now 105 is right below the cutoff for 5th grade. Oh, caveat, as we're playing around with this data, I'm just going to be typing in one correct data point, but obviously that's not a best practice. Every single one of these cells needs to have a number in it for every single kid getting tested on this benchmark level, okay? But if we're playing around right now and showing you how the colors work, I'll just enter 1. Okay, so on a 5th grade level, 105 is below the cutoff for 5th grade. That means this student, when it turns red, this student needs to be back tested. So I would then come over here, oops, forgot to delete that data from my last try. Okay, let's delete that real quick. So instead of a 5, right, I'm supposed to be testing them down. So I need to select now that I'm testing them on a 4. And here I'll enter in, let's say, 118. And now that's within the range of being good for 4th grade. So it turns green, okay? Let's go back. Now, there are 3 options for what colors things can turn. So if I'm testing this kid on a 5th grade, they get a 105. That's below the starting score for 5th grade. So it turns red. It means I need to back test. If I get a 106, that is golden. So it turns green. And anytime you see an RCBM score turn green, you are done testing. I'll say that again. If it turns green, you're done testing. Okay? If this student does really well on a 5th grade, if they get a 124 or higher, then I get to up test them. So now I'm going, if it turns, and the RCBM median is going to turn blue. So if you see the median turn blue, you're going to come over here and test the next grade level up, which is 6th, okay? And on a 6th grade, as long as they do a 123 or above, it turns green and they're done, okay? You'll also notice that the spreadsheet is now going to know that this student is fluent because they got a 6 and a 123, and so they're actually going to place into a tier 1.5 class, which is what we would expect. So even though it didn't say fluent all the way at the beginning, we know from the data they're fluent and they're now ready for tier 1.5. Okay. Now, it's possible that here we tested on a 5, right, and we got a 124, and then let's say we tested them on a 6 and they got below 123. Let's say they did poorly on a 6 and they got a 100. Now the spreadsheet is telling you, it's turning red, and it's telling you to back test. But are you going to back test? No, because you can only go in one direction. So we started at a 5th grade level, we went up to a 6th grade level. We're not going to go back and re-administer the 5th grade level test. They just took it. So at this point, we're done. And their final data point will be the 6th grade level with the 100 data, and that's where we'll set their progress monitoring goal for next year, okay? Let's look at some other examples. Let's say, let's do this 4th grade student, and I'll show you how it might work the other way. Let's say this 4th grade student had a tough time on their benchmark, and they need to be back tested, okay? They got an 88. When they get to the 3rd grade level, if they test at a 67, their data is turning green and they're done. But let's say they did great on the 3rd grade level. Let's say they got a 103. Again, the spreadsheet's turning blue, which would normally mean to test up, but we can't test up because we just tested them on a 4th grade level, right? Again, you can only go in one direction. So if you have to go down from a 4th to a 3rd, and then it's telling you to test back up again, you don't. You just stop. And then their final data point becomes that 3rd grade level. Okay? You'll notice they're not getting a tier placement yet, and that's because they don't, I believe, have maze data entered. Let's go see what they're missing. This will be a good example of like figuring out what's going on. It does say that they're not fluent,